Welcome to lesson 1.4. We're kind of shifting gears and starting with some angle relationships. Some of these you guys have probably seen before, and then some of you haven't. This is kind of just an introductory lesson. We'll do some problem solving when you get to the station with me, but right now this is kind of just explaining what the angles each are and all that. So we have 4 different angle relationships we're going to be looking at: adjacent angles, vertical angles, complementary angles, and supplementary angles. So we're going to go ahead and go to the open spot. So I've already have the facts written down. So if you need to, when I get done with the video, if you haven't finished writing them down, just pause the video so you can see all of the things. So let me get my colors and then we'll get started. Okay. So, first one we're going to start with is complementary angles. Complementary angles have a few different facts. It's just 2 angles whose sum is 90 degrees. Okay, so first things first is they can be shown in a right angle. So, you know a right angle is 90 degrees, right? So, if you have this, and let's say the angle goes like this, or here, let's do that a little different. Let's say the angle goes right here, then you know that the 2 angles are complementary because they add up to be the whole angle. So this angle plus this angle adds up to be the whole angle. So that would be like the first angle, and then this would be the second angle, okay? Or they don't have to be next to each other or within a right angle. So when we're looking at angle diagrams, if 2 angles add up to be 90 degrees, that makes them complementary. They don't have to be next to each other. So for example, you could have like an angle right here. Let me redo that so I can write it. That's 50 degrees. And then the other angle is like over here, and it's 40 degrees. Those are complementary because 50 plus 40 is 90 degrees, okay? So they don't have to be in a right angle. They can be, but they don't have to be, okay? So now let's look at supplementary angles. Supplementary angles are where 2 angles whose sum is 180 degrees. That means they make a line, okay? A line is 180 degrees because it's flat. Okay, so it can look like, here's my flat line, and I have an angle. So this angle plus this angle would be a supplementary angle because it makes the full line. Okay, so that is one way we can look at it. You'll see those a good chunk. Or they can be 2 separate angles. So they can share a line, because here's the line right here. Or they can be 2 separate angles. So for example, if I have 100 degrees right here, and this angle right here is 20 degrees, or not 20, excuse me, 80 degrees, then those would be considered supplementary because you add them together and they make 180. Okay, so that's all that complementary and supplementary mean. Those 2 you have probably heard of before. The next 2 I don't know if you have or not. If you haven't, they're not super complicated. Okay, adjacent angles. Adjacent just means to be next to each other. Okay, so they're right next to each other. They're right by each other. So for example, the person you're sitting next to is the person you're adjacent to. You're right next to them. Okay? Or you could look at the tables, and the table that's next to the table you're sitting at, they're adjacent. They're right next to each other. Okay, so the facts say angle 1 and angle 2 share a common vertex B. Angle 1 and 2 share a common side BC. And angle 1 plus angle 2 equals angle ABD. And that is all confusing without the diagram. So let's draw the diagram. So let's say I have an angle like this. So A, B, and this is going to be D. Okay, and let's say I have just this angle right here. Okay, this is not an angle bisector. That's not what we're talking about, okay? We're just talking about any angle that are next to each other. So our first angle, angle 1, I'm going to highlight it in blue. Angle 1 is right here. Okay, so that is angle 1. I'm going to label it with 1. Okay, and then angle 2 is the smaller angle right here. Okay, that's angle 2. And what we know is that they're adjacent angles because they share the side BC. So you see this side right here, BC, they're sharing that. So that means they're adjacent. So if they're sharing a vertex, which is the B, so right here, the endpoint where the angles meet, and they share the common side, then that means that they're adjacent. Okay, and then what that also tells you is that angle 1 plus angle 2 is the whole angle. Okay, so because they're next to each other, you can add them up and that equals the whole thing. They're not equal. If there was an angle bisector, they would be equal, but it's not. And we'll get to angle bisectors in the next lesson. Okay, and then vertical angles. So vertical angles happen when two lines intersect. Okay, they're non-adjacent. That means they are not sharing a common side and they are not next to each other. Okay, so if I have this line right here coming through here, or let me draw it a little differently. If I have this line, and let's say I have another line that comes right here through here and intersects, it has created vertical angles. Okay, now if it is a vertical angle, they're equal to each other. Okay, so we're going to kind of label these with numbers. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So your pairing is that angle 1 and 3 are equal and angle 2 and 4 are equal. Okay, so if you notice, they make essentially the same V. Okay, so if you look here, this makes a V and this makes the exact same V. So they're diagonal from each other and that makes them vertical angles. Okay, remember, this is only when two lines intersect. It's not just some random thing. It's when two lines intersect, this is what happens. And then angle 1 and angle 3 make the same V as well. Okay, so angle 1 and angle 3 are also equal because they make the same V. They're directly across from each other. They're diagonal to, or across from each other. Okay, so that makes them equal. So vertical angles are equal. Now that does not mean that angle 1 and angle 2 are equal. They are not. Those would be adjacent angles because they share a common vertex right in the middle and they share a common side. Okay, so remember, they have to be across from each other. They can't be next to each other. So that completes lesson 1.4. Bye.